Hello and welcome back to the Right Within podcast. I'm your host, Michaela the Conscious Queen, and in today's episode, we have a special guest. He's one of my best friends. He's a trade unionist and a jazz and blues historian. Please welcome to the show, Mr. Todd Bryant Weeks.
Michaela, thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm so excited to be here today.
Thanks for coming. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background?
Okay. Well, I am kind of my relationship with music is sort of twofold in that I work directly with musicians. I
Nice.
work for Local 802 of the American Federation of Musicians in New York City, which is a musicians union, and I work especially with jazz musicians. So my job is to help jazz musicians get access to benefits, to make sure that when money is changing hands, that they're paid fairly, and just to get the protections of a union contract.
Nice. So what about jazz in your personal life, in like outside of work?
Well, I mean, I'm not a jazz musician, but I have, of course, listened to a lot of jazz, and I've also written about jazz. I published a biography of a jazz trumpet player in 2008, which was called Lux in My Corner, The Life and Music of Hot Lips Page.
Yeah, guys, check it out.
It's You can find it on Amazon. It's 2008 Routledge Press, Lux in My Corner. So I've been writing about music for about 15 years, and I'm working on another book right now on the blues. But of course, I've been listening to music and playing in bands since I was in college, and I am particularly focused on roots music, blues, soul, jazz, even country music. American roots music is my focus.
Right. Okay, awesome. Thank you for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
I had you on the show today because this week's episode is going to be about the power of music
Mm-hmm.
and why music is so important, especially on a spiritual level. I guess I'll start by sharing like my experience
Mm-hmm.
with music. So my parents actually met, like my mom was a dancer, my dad was a drummer. So I feel like I was born out of music, kind of.
That's great.
And I grew up like playing piano in my house. And I've always kind of had this retreat to music, like whenever I wanted to escape or, just try to have some sort of relief in my life, I always turn to music. I always turn to like things that sound good. And then even on my spiritual journey, I started listening to frequencies, like certain solfeggio frequencies, and it's like they kind of even you out or balance you out, and they even like kind of heal the soul. So I wanted to ask you, like, in your experience, how has music, or specifically jazz or blues, kind of motivated you or helped you in your life?
Well, I mean, that's a complex question, and it could have many answers. But I think that probably the most specific
Sorry,
answer...
guys, we're outside in busy Brooklyn.
we're bringing Brooklyn to the listeners. I would say that for me, I had listened to the radio as a kid,
Yeah.
and like in the 80s and into the 90s. And then at a certain point, I discovered actually soul music. And it was the music of the 1960s that just spoke to me. And the artist actually that spoke to me most strongly was Ray Charles. And Ray Charles has been called like, like the high priest of soul, or like, the inventor almost of soul music. And it was this combination actually of like rhythm and blues, which is basically three chords,
Yeah.
and gospel music. And he sort of invented a new form. So he was taking like secular lyrics, like lyrics about love and, even about sex and romance, but also about loss and suffering, but like in a secular mode, and laying them on top of like gospel harmonies or gospel tunes even.
Right.
So I think it was like the gospel element, like the sacred element that grabbed me.
Okay.
And of course it was the secular element that I thought was fun and sexy and like, something that you could listen to at a party and have a good
Right.
time.
Right.
So soul music grabbed me, and then from there I went into, started playing blues with friends in college, and then I actually got deep into jazz, but it was actually, oddly, it was early jazz. It was jazz from like 100 years ago. So, but in terms of personal connection to it,
Yeah.
or the way it makes me feel,
Yeah.
or like why,
Yeah.
I think it's similar to what you were saying, is that it's always been a kind of a place that I could go to
Right.
that was mine, and I used it as a retreat. I used it as a way to carve out an identity. I associated myself with a certain sound, a certain
Right.
set of sounds,
Okay.
and they made me feel a certain way. And that's
Right.
why I wanted to go back to that feeling, so I would just keep going back and going
Right.
back.
So those sounds kind of gave you this sort of peace inside. And not even just peace. Sometimes you just wanted to groove out or have a good
Yeah.
time, or like, listen to like a party, like go to a party or
Yeah,
have,
for sure.
have fun.
I mean, like somebody like Aretha Franklin, she could do all that. Like she can give you like the most, like the deepest feeling of like almost like a spiritual feeling, but at the same time she has so much like funk in her voice,
Yeah.
so much power in her voice, so much life
Right.
in her voice, that I just would return to Aretha and Sam and Dave and Wilson
Yeah.
Pickett and Carla Thomas, Rufus, and Otis Redding,
Right.
and
right.
Sam Cooke, all those artists from the 50s and 60s.
Cool. So what I'm getting from you is that like a lot of artists kind of influenced your love for jazz, your love for blues, and like it kind of just made you like this, like, I don't know, you tell me, like connoisseur almost.
Well, I mean, I think what it was is that I was in the arts. I had studied acting in college, and I was trying to make it as an actor. And I went as far as I could go with that. And then I was really casting about for something else to do. And I thought, well, maybe I could teach. And, I probably should have gotten a more, like, serviceable degree. But I ended up getting a degree in jazz history and research from
That's pretty
Rutgers
cool.
University. Yeah, and I taught for a while. I did some college courses in jazz history, and that's how I landed the union job. So I followed this kind of weird trajectory. I wasn't in the center of the music, but I was sort of like, moving alongside of it. I worked, for example, for a while at the Louis Armstrong House Museum in Corona,
In
Queens. Yeah.
Right.
And Louis Armstrong lived there between 1942 and 1971.
Wow.
And I worked there as like a museum assistant for a while. It was just about 6 months. But I just wanted to get close to the music,
Right. You felt like so connected to it, like even spiritually, you would say, right? Like it was just kind of like you knew that that's where you belonged, like that's where you felt most yourself, like most authentic, right? And I feel like that's really important when we listen to music, because it's a way of self-expression. I think like earlier you said kind of like identity, how you identify is like a lot of the times by the music that we listen to. So
Yeah.
I feel like on a spiritual level, music can like help us figure out who we are.
Yes.
And also like kind of guide us down a path. Like you said, it kind of took you down a certain path.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. So the more we listen to like music that like speaks to us,
Yeah.
and like it kind of like wakes up that
I didn't
part
know
in our
I was
brain.
going down that path.
Right.
I
right.
mean, like when I started listening to B.B. King or James Brown or whatever, I had no idea that I was going to write a book about a jazz trumpet player.
Right. We don't know.
No. So,
yeah.
I mean, but in that regard, I do think it is a heart-opening experience too, and it's not always easy in this society to keep an open heart.
No, I feel like it can definitely be kind of challenging, especially when we become adults. A lot of the time, it's like, oh, you have to get a job and you have to pay bills and you have responsibilities and family and things like that.
Yeah.
So a lot of time we don't really like have that, what is it, like space to, how can I say, like, find that joy, that we used to have as children.
As children, yeah, for
but
sure.
I feel like one way, and you said this to me earlier, like we can connect through music, right? So like, let's say for example, you're trying to invoke a memory or something that you feel was powerful when you were a kid, or like just in a moment in your life where you felt really good. You can use music to invoke those feelings again, which I feel like is so powerful.
Yeah, I mean, like my parents always listened to like the Beatles, and they listened to like 60s like classic rock or whatever.
Yeah.
So I had all that in the background, but of course I grew up at a time when radio was still big, and you could listen to WABC, WCBS, WNBC, and those were local radio stations, and they played pop music, and it was like you would hear the same music coming out of like your car radio that you would hear coming out of your like nightstand radio, and then you would hear it like coming out of a transistor radio on the street or whatever,
Right, so it was everywhere.
So, I mean, it's much more diversified now. There's so
Right.
many different forms of music, so many different genres, so many different ways to experience music.
Right.
Not that it wasn't diverse then, but I think it's much more diverse now.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like we have like technology and like Apple Music and things like that, Spotify. So all these things, like, it kind of gives us a lot of access to music, all different types of music.
Much more access than I had growing up.
Yeah, for sure. I would like to ask you, so do you think that listening to music can heal us like on a spiritual level?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that's, in the most obvious example, that's why music is part of like a faith-based, like faith-based communities have music.
Right.
And for me, particularly, the music of like gospel music, Mahalia Jackson, the Staples Singers, like all of these different artists that came out of the black church, like there is such deep emotion and feeling in that music. Much of it that comes out of suffering, comes out of like a deep, struggle, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a connectivity that I think you feel with the expression that's coming out of the music. So your own pain, I mean, I'm a white guy from the suburbs of New York City. I never experienced what it was like to grow up in the segregated South, but, the struggle as, evidenced or as exemplified in that type of music, you can connect with the feeling behind it, and the feeling also of redemption.
Yeah, for sure. And how using that music can heal, can motivate,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Can like give you that sort of strength that you need
Yes.
to go forward. Like you said, they were struggling, and so the music, the songs, kind of like, pushed them in a way, or gave them that sense of hope.
Yes.
Right, that sense of like everything is gonna be okay.
Yeah.
Right, which I think is like super powerful. Like, even me today, like I go to the gym and I gotta put my playlist on.
Yeah, for sure.
Like I gotta listen to that music that like motivates you and like kind of gives you that push, right, to like do better, to be better. So I totally agree with what you're saying. And let's see.
It's grounding, I think. The music can be grounding. Again, there's a certain degree of escape or identification with something that you might not be having in your immediate personal life. or even in like your job, or if your family life or school life is not the way you want it to be in that moment, you can retreat. Everybody has their groove, right? Everybody has their tunes. Everybody
Yeah.
has a way of stepping back. And I feel like just like a good book, like if you find a really good book that speaks to you, I feel like that book, you read the book, but the book kind of reads you to it. Like it
Yeah.
reads itself into you.
Yeah.
And I feel that music does that too. Like
Right. Yeah.
it
Kind of
plays into us.
It reflects where you are in life, right?
It
Like,
informs us.
yeah, like sometimes, have you ever experienced this? Like you might be out and about, or like just minding your business, whatever, and then you might hear a song like on the radio, or like just in the passing by, and like the lyrics are kind of what's going on in your life.
Yes.
And you're just like, what the heck? Like, what is the universe doing?
I
right
mean,
now?
I just always say, like, I don't get too much into like signs and say, oh, this is like the universe talking to me. But I will say, I feel like I'm in the right time at the right place.
The right place.
And that
yeah.
moment, yeah.
It's so cool, yeah. So I feel like that's also kind of like how the universe communicates to us, whether we're doing the right thing or not. Like it communicates through music, through the songs that we listen to, the music that we listen to. And I also want to ask you, like, do you think that listening to certain music or lyrics can help you manifest?
Yeah, I mean that's a big topic, and we talked about this earlier. And there's a sort of a general sense of manifestation, right? Like manifesting positivity, and then there's a more specific kind of manifestation where you might be like trying to seek goals and try and realize goals. I say that it's both. It could be both. Certainly, I can tell you. I mean, I've spent years and years buying records. Like I have now, I think almost 1,500 record albums in my house.
Wow.
Well, some mean, some people have tens of thousands of records in their collection. I don't know how anybody listens to all that music, But, it's the weird thing about it is that was a pursuit. So in some ways, I guess for me personally, right, the music itself, right, manifested in me, like my love of the music manifested in a particular way, because I finally felt at a certain point that I knew enough about it that I could speak about it or write about it and not sound like a fool.
Right, right.
And there's a lot of people who know a lot about these things. So personally for me, it allowed me to manifest in the sense that I was able to bring my critical voice or my analytical voice forward in a way that was both hopefully like incisive or like provides some sort of interesting insight, but it's also celebratory. I think the main thing I always wanted to do was to be able to celebrate whatever I was writing about, because it gave me joy.
Okay.
So I wanted to be able to share that joy with other people.
Right. So the music, in a way, helped you to manifest more joy in your life.
Absolutely. And hopefully, like I said, bring joy to other people. So, I mean, it's weird. Like I'll share something with somebody online, whatever. I'll like send somebody a link. I've sent you links to things before, and fortunately, you and I, you and me have similar tastes.
Yeah.
I mean, your tastes are very broad.
Yeah.
And mine are less broad.
I like all music that sounds good.
Yeah, I mean, you can go from like hip hop to techno to funk to soul to blues. You like romantic music.
I do.
And jazz. You like big band jazz.
Yeah.
Like that Frank Sinatra tune that you love.
Oh yeah. I like this one song by Frank Sinatra. It's called like Just in Time.
Just in Time.
And
yeah.
like it's so like
Just
calming and relaxing. Got me just in time. Like check it out. Whenever you guys have time.
But that was important for you also because of the message of the lyrics.
He's like basically just talking about how like his lover came just in the nick of time.
Yeah.
Right? Like saved him from the dumps. Like put a smile on his face.
Yeah.
Like and just gave him that hope again. So I feel like that's really important, especially with music. The music that we listen to, it shouldn't just be like something that we're playing in the background, but it should be used as like an instrument, or as like as a way to manifest better things into our lives. So like for me personally, when I listen to music, I like to, like, you know, if it's a good beat, I'll listen to it. But like more so the lyrics, like what are they saying in the words?
Yeah.
Because that is actually very powerful, because like our subconscious mind, when we say something out loud, our subconscious is listening. So like let's say for example, in a song, like let's say you want to manifest like more money, right? So you would listen to a song that's like, oh, you know, I'm rich, or my pockets are full, you know, or like I you know, I'm that guy or that girl or whatever. And so it kind of manifests in your life, like physically, like maybe not overnight, but you know, the more you kind of say it, the more it kind of feels real. Yeah.
So it's coming forward as like, you know, it's sort of that notion of like right speech, like right thought, right speech, right action.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I think one of the things that I've learned from you, you know, recently is this notion of like bringing positivity, and bringing humility,
Yeah.
and bringing like generosity, you know.
Okay.
And it seems that music, you know, when music is right, or when music is sort of hitting all of those notes somehow. I don't know if we can describe a piece of music as being generous or humble.
I think totally. Why
But
not?
sometimes I guess it's identification with oftentimes the vocalist or the lyrics. And one thing that I've noticed about really good vocalists is that they're singing, but it's almost like they're speaking and they're singing at the same time. So they're like telling a story.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's what I always love about jazz, you know, listening to Charlie Parker or Duke Ellington. We were talking about spiritual music. Duke Ellington did some amazing sacred concerts in the 1960s.
Oh, nice.
Where he wrote like praise music.
Okay.
And he used a big choir and of course a big jazz band and recorded it in a big cathedral.
Oh, wow.
And these recordings are so beautiful. And then, you know, the other spiritual music that I think about with jazz in particular is John Coltrane's album A Love Supreme, which is from 1964, which is just totally a prayer. It's just giving it up for God, the whole thing.
Right.
And the Love Supreme is the supreme love of God for all of us, you know.
And that's so beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah.
How we can express ourselves through music, you know, whether we're happy, whether we're sad, whether we want to praise God, whether we want to be like angry, like, you know, like rock metal, like smash your head into something, you know, like type of music. But we have that freedom, right, as like spiritual beings, to use music as an outlet to like express ourselves and to create the life that we want to live.
Right. That's the point of manifestation, right?
Yeah.
That's, I was trying to, I got off it a little bit, but yeah, you brought me back. Like this notion of like being generous, being humble, being kind, doing good works.
Yeah.
And I think that when we connect with music that has that vibe, it enhances our ability to manifest.
For sure.
You know, those qualities.
Yeah, for sure. It brings it out in us.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I want to say thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
For coming to the show today.
Cool.
I was so happy to have you on.
I'm so happy to be here.
And that was this week's episode, The Power of Music with Mr. Todd Weeks. Next week's episode, we will be talking about meditation, the power of meditation, and how you can use it in your daily life to manifest and be a better person. So thank you guys for tuning in this week, and I'll see you next week. Stay right within.